I had been asked to review this debate, and I'm flattered that somebody would want to hear my opinion about, well, anything really. And thank you for the donation. I really appreciate it. Now, I have seen one or two interesting debates on the whatever podcast, but I don't normally watch them or this podcast because, it's a bunch of bimbos and really lowbrow stuff. And if someone like Andrew Wilson is on there, it's, the typical picking wings off a butterfly or low picking low hanging fruit, basically. You know what I mean? So it's a bunch of mismatches. It's kind of like the whole show is a bit like Fresh and Fit, just not ghetto or less ghetto, I guess. But maybe this will be interesting. Really?
if you'd like.
Sure, yeah.
So that we're not speaking past each other, when you define feminism, would you define it as the pursuance of egalitarianism between men and women?
Yes.
No other real qualifiers?
Not for me. I do think it's difficult to define because I think that everyone kind of has their own definition. So when talking about it, it's difficult to like discuss feminism as like a monolithic thing. But yeah, I think it's a good working definition.
If it's a movement towards egalitarianism, this would imply that there was not egalitarianism, and so feminism was set in opposition to patriarchy.
Yes, I would agree.
Okay, so that's an entailment we can agree to.
Yeah.
So I'd like to start with a basic argument before I move to larger arguments. My first argument, my first objection, is what I call an equal force objection. Men are the enforcement arm of society. And because they are the enforcers of rights, and I don't believe that rights exist as an objective standard, but rather they're a social construction of the mind.
Okay.
I think we actually have is what's called force, right? So force.
I've heard Andrew make this argument on The Crucible, and I think made by Jim Bob has also picked it up. And as soon as I heard it, my spidey senses started, I don't know, ringing an alarm. And my intuition was just telling me that this can't be right. This can't be a good argument, right? But let's listen to what else he has to say.
Our rights. That's all rights really can be, because the entailment of a right is it's only as good as who can enforce it. I do not believe that women can enforce their own rights and that only men can enforce their rights, and so therefore I do not believe egalitarianism is possible, nor should it be something that we move towards.
Mm-hmm. So you think that men are the enforcement arm?
So this is essentially might is right, right? And this is why I'm not sure I quite understand what's going on here, but maybe we'll figure that out. Because from what I understand, Andrew is a Christian, and Christian ethics is a mix of virtue ethics and deontology. So, building moral character and duties, having duties, right? I haven't heard him talking about his religious beliefs much, but that's my general understanding of Christianity. It's definitely not might is right, or at the very least, it's not supposed to be, right? So, what is going on here, right? Like, I just don't understand, because that seems to be in contrast to Christianity. Why does he believe these things?
Arm in the sense that they enforce rights or our conception of rights, or are you arguing that they're the enforcement arm as in like they're enforcing law and order?
Well, let's back up to make sure that we're not speaking past each other again. Okay. So rights, you would agree, are not a tangible thing, but they're just a conception. They're
I agree with
a
that.
social construction.
Yes.
So if you are to have a right, an entitlement, absent a duty, if we can define a right as that, then
Nope, don't do that. So Andrew's just framing this whole thing, right? He's a seasoned debater. She's not, right? Don't just grant him shit. Make him prove it. Why would he say that? Why rights or privileges absent duties? Now, maybe that's somebody's belief, some kind of worldview, but that's not what rights are, right? Duties and rights are one and the same thing. They're the same category. Why are you separating them? It's they're the same thing. If you zoom out enough, right? Rights and duties are the same thing.
what you're really talking about is force. You're talking about having force to make sure that you have this entitlement. That would be necessary. And so when I'm talking about force, I'm saying that men have the monopoly on force.
Okay, so there's obviously rights don't exist as in the physical world, right? These are, if you want to say, social constructs or the God-given. Again, this is what confuses me, right, about Andrew. I would think he'd go with the latter, not the social construct thing, right? Now, if he's doing an internal critique of her worldview, that would make sense. But how can he be making an internal critique of her worldview when she hasn't provided? She's hardly spoken, right? She hasn't told us what her worldview is, and he's just been framing this whole thing, saying I, right? I believe, I think. These are all his ideas, right? That again are not congruent with Christianity, are they?
And because they have a monopoly on force, anytime they so choose, they can take the rights away from women, but it's never possible the other way around.
How can you take away a social construct? Right? If we agree that we have rights, then we have rights. Now, the enforcement of rights is something else. It's not one and the same thing. Rights don't exist or not exist because they're guaranteed, or what they dictate should be is, right? What they dictate is right, right? That's right. Rights are and morals are the same thing. Whether or not these morally correct things are enforced, right? That doesn't mean that they don't exist or that they don't exist, right? It's a concept. How can you can't take away, you can't erase. I mean, I suppose, if you gave me some kind of drug or brainwashed me, you could erase the concept from my head. I suppose so, but you can't really do that. You can't erase the concept of rights, right? So rights exist as a concept, as a social construct, right? We agree that these are the correct, morally correct things to do. Rights, right? That's what they are, right? Of course they are. And they are not. So Andrew is framing everything in order to set this girl up, and she's just naive. She's not a seasoned debater, right?
I guess I would disagree that rights are only upheld through force. Like in this day and age, I think that it's easy to say that hypothetically men could turn against women, and
Do you need force to create a social construct or erase a social construct? Right? They're completely separate. Right?
to use like brute strength and brute force to take away rights. But I think that
Sorry.
it's okay. I think that we have a
Are
pretty
you
well
mocking her, Brian?
a pretty well-founded legal system that we used to uphold rights, or our conception of rights. I think I would disagree that rights are only force. I do agree that they are a social construction.
Your legal system is force.
I mean, the legal system, yes, it's force. It's coercion.
The legal system is the legal system, and rights are rights. They're two different things.
But I think
no, it's not just coercion; it's force. So
yeah.
if
Well, unless you're talking about legal rights. But is that what he's talking about?
absent you doing whatever the legal system determines you must do, what is the
coercion? But I think
no, it's not just coercion; it's force. So
yeah.
if absent you doing whatever the legal system determines you must do, what is the remedy?
I mean that's a good point. I just think that. Do you think that rights are enforced like physically? Like,
yes.
Do you think that men? Okay.
Physically.
Could you give me an example of that? Because I think I don't really fully understand.
If you want to make an appeal that your rights are in some way being taken away from you, or your rights in some way are being violated, who would you make the appeal to?
So your rights can't be taken away from you. They can be violated. These are two different things.
Supreme Court? I don't know.
And so let's assume whoever you make this appeal to on a court agrees with you. They're going to be able to use the power of their office to appeal to brute force in order to defend or take your right away. So if I want to send you to prison, I'm taking your rights away, right? Would this...
Well, how can you take a thing that doesn't exist away? That doesn't make sense, Andrew.
Does that require force? Physical force?
Yes.
And does it require physical force to keep you there?
Yeah, I would say that taking someone to prison and keeping someone in prison does require physical force. But I mean, I guess abortion rights. It's a very recent. I fail to see how the right to get an abortion. Maybe not the right, because obviously punishing someone who performs an illegal abortion involves taking someone to prison. But how is the right to an abortion upheld by physical force?
Well, because if you go to get an abortion, okay, and somebody comes in to stop you from getting an abortion, meaning they're going to stop you from exercising that right, if that's a right you believe you have, wouldn't you make an appeal to men with guns to come in and stop them from stopping you from doing that?
Okay, I think I understand what you mean now. I think I didn't fully understand what you mean. But, I mean, in that case, women can train to use weaponry and use guns. I mean, we have weaponry now that can kind of fill the gap between men and women's.
Everything comes down to actual physical force. And let me explain what I mean. There's not one time in history ever that you can point to where women have been able to collectively use force in order to dominate men. However, every point in history...
How would he know this? Right? How would he know this? Huh. I would just say, hey, provide evidence, right? He didn't ask her to provide an example of this, right? Of course this has happened. It's more likely that it will happen the other way around, but of course these things have happened in the past. Now, on a broad societal level, that's a different story. But I think this is a problem with this argument. This idea that because it's the argument is might makes right, right? It's not what men say goes, right? It's not men make right, it's might makes right. So hypothetically, you could conceive of a world, and we're not there yet. She thinks we may be, but no, but we could. And if society decides, right, somehow collectively, if we decide to move in that direction, we'll get there. With enough technology, the equalizer she's thinking of, right, the gun or whatever have you, it'll be there. Of course, it'll be there. It just takes enough, will, ingenuity, and technology, and women can be as strong or even stronger than men, right? We already have these bodysuits that like special forces use or they're testing that make a man, I don't know, 10 times stronger than he normally is. Basically, turn him into a cyborg, right? So yeah, I think this is why this argument fails, is because one of the reasons why it fails, because again, the argument is might makes right, not men. And it's assumed that men will always have the might, right? Okay, prove it. Where's the evidence for that? Right? She's already given you evidence that in certain circumstances, a woman could overpower a man, right? She could be mightier than a man. Now, collectively, yeah, men are more powerful than women at this point in time, but it's easy to see how that could be, with enough technology, again, this could be reversed. So if you're arguing for a patriarchy, that it should always be so, you're going to need a different argument, right? Fine, it works for now, okay, but how can you be so sure that it always will, right? You're not really arguing for men's supremacy. You're just arguing for the more powerful gender or person to be in power, right? It could, yeah. I think that's one of the reasons why this argument doesn't make much sense to me. Because, well, hypothetically, right? What if women brainwash men to do their bidding, or they drug them, or somehow influence? And this has happened in history, right? Women have influenced men to do their bidding. Now, that, along with maybe some brainwashing or gaslighting and technology, yada, 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 might isn't all men necessarily. It doesn't have to be. There's nothing that says that it will forever be men. So, again, if you want to preserve the patriarchy, or you believe the patriarchy is right, morally correct, then you need to argue that men make right, not might makes right.
History I can almost point to where men can and have done that, and the opposite cannot be true. Meaning that if men in even small collectives decide to take the rights away from women, there's not actually anything women can do about it. However, if women mildly and collectively,
So he just asserts these things like it's true. Okay, well, you need to provide evidence for the things you're saying. Now, I don't understand how people just let them get away with that. Now, generally, yeah, this is true, right? But again, it doesn't mean, first of all, he has no evidence. He doesn't provide evidence that this has never happened before. I mean, right? That women, I think matriarchal societies are, for the most part, a myth, but there's some evidence. I don't think they're accepted to have existed, but there's evidence that they may have. And at the very least, and I'm pretty sure there's evidence that egalitarian, or if not purely matriarchal societies that where women had as much, if not more, power than men, right? So this isn't like so black and white, right? Like if you're debating someone and they're making these grand assertions, you gotta be like, yo, evidence. But don't just grant them everything unless it's obviously true, which this isn't. nor and to say that it was always thus because I say so, thus it will always be thus because I say so. These aren't arguments. Now, I do agree that it would seem, and not it would seem, but yeah, men have, from everything that we know, men have dominated societies, right? But that doesn't mean that it will always be thus, right? That's some kind of fallacy.
Or in a small or large collective, try to take the rights away from men, there is something they can do about that.
But I do think that would require somehow taking weaponry out of the picture. I mean, but
you don't need to take weaponry out of the picture. Weapons require strength to use. Those who are strong can use them better. Not only that, field equipment weighs a lot, right? Equipment in general weighs a lot. You also have the endurance problem, the skeletal problems. You have the heat regulation problems. The distinctions between men and women are incredible. And so when you look
So
at...
this is just like brute force ignorance, right? And like, what about manipulation, right? What about intelligence? What about pussy power, right? This idea that like a woman could never dominate a man because she's not strong enough. I mean, come on, man. Like, did you did Andrew marry the first girl he fucked? I mean, and if he did, then I think that would prove my point.
Look at a force applicator. Men have a monopoly on force. By the way, I can demonstrate this pretty easy. Western nations have become more egalitarian than they ever have been. You would agree, right?
Yeah.
But who still stays predominantly in these enforcement positions?
I mean, predominantly, yes, but
why?
Women... Well, obviously, I totally agree with you that there is a physical difference between men and women, and they are stronger. But I do think that the gap is significantly smaller with weaponry. I don't think it's fully, brought to an equal playing field. But
I mean, in other words, if men have weapons and women have weapons, women lose.
I mean, yeah, but there are women in law enforcement.
Yes.
There are.
There are more problems with this argument. It's this one of the underlying premises and assumptions is that all men will always team up against all women, right? Like, well, why couldn't some men fight on the side of the women? Oh, I mean, if let's grant Andrew that patriarchy is, you know, the way things have always been, the way things are today, right? This is his argue. This is the entailment of his argument, right? Like, it's inescapable. You can't have anything other than a patriarchy. Period. I mean, fuck, evidence. Prove it. Don't just say it. Prove it, right? But well, if patriarchy is right, and that's all that there is, well, then how did women get all these rights that they didn't have before, right? How did we move in the direction of egalitarianism, or to a point where a lot of people would say that we have a gynocentric society? Or I'm not sure I agree with that, but some men seem to believe that because um, they seem to believe they've lost a lot of power and women have gained a lot of power, right? Well, they couldn't have, clearly, according to Andrew, women couldn't have done it by themselves, right? It was other men who took their side for whatever reason, nefarious or underhanded or whatever, right? To break up the family or whatever, um, depopulate. But yeah, men have fought against men on behalf of women. This idea that like men are this monolith that what is it? What else is saying? Oh, that like this this high school motto, right? Bros before hoes. I mean, that shit didn't it didn't even work in high school, right? Plenty of dudes backstabbed each other over pussy, right? So this whole idea like bros before hoes, that didn't even work in high school. We're just gonna act like, and she's just gonna grant it, like that's the reality we live in. I mean, okay.
Female prison wardens, COs, things like that. So
And they are,
I
and while there are some exceptional women, I agree, who can be inside of positions like this, there are some exceptional women. Maybe one day we'll have that first female Navy SEAL. Maybe it'll happen. Okay, wait, it hasn't happened yet, but one day there will be an exceptional Navy SEAL badass.
Navy SEALs don't run the world. I mean, it's just, come on.
As G.I. Jane type chick who can wear the skin tight leather with the hand grenades and do the ninja kicks.
So clearly, Andrew, like a lot of, and I'm not saying he is a red pillar, but like a lot of red pill guys, right? I don't know, the menists, the manosphere red pillars. Um, they dislike the way women have been portrayed in media, how they've portrayed themselves. They don't like how women have taken on masculine roles in society, so on and so forth. They resent this sort of thing, right? They ridicule it, and whatever. It is what it is, right? Okay, fair enough. But if it's a dog eat dog world out there, right? And it's man against women, if we're to believe that this is the world that we live in, right? Men are over here on this side and women on the other side, and we're just at war, or it's hanging over our heads all the time, right? Any kinetic conflict between the sexes, black and white, is, potentially imminent. Then what you're doing is pushing at least some women into these you're saying that if you're saying that men and women are engaged in combat, right? If women want to win, they got to become more like men, but you don't like that. So why are you pushing women to be the thing that you don't want them to? Make that make sense.
But those are going to be exceptional cases.
I agree that they are exceptional cases, but you're saying so men are the default enforcement arm of rights, of legal rights, but there are women in those positions. So I fail to see, and
because
they are
men can take them away from them collectively whenever they so choose, and they have no recourse. But men always do, which is force.
Collectively, sure, but I mean there are still exceptions to that. So that there are women in those positions, and by and large, men are stronger than women. But there are weak men and there are strong women, and I feel that the exceptions to those cases do present a problem.
But even weaker men.
No one can take away your rights. You could. I know I'm harping on this, but I think it's important. You can give your rights away by doing something wrong, right? If you do wrong, then you're not right. You don't have rights, right? And the enforcement comes in. That's the punishment, right? You've you've surrendered your rights by being wrong, and the enforcement just makes you make sure that um, you get punished, basically.
Even much weaker men are still usually stronger than even average women. And
I agree with
this is the problem with equalization. For instance, if you were to have a prison, okay, or let's try this a different way. Let's say that you were a general in the armed forces, and you had a special forces unit which was compiled of 100.
He really presents women in these positions. He just ridicules this shit, right? He throws it in their faces, saying, "Nah, nah, 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 you can't do it," right? While at the same time daring them to. saying that if you want the things that you think you want, you got to fight me, but I'm going to win, right? But I don't like men and women fighting. This is It seems manipulative, right? Doesn't it?
percent women and one that was compiled of 100% men. And you had a job which you absolutely had to get done. It was critical. It was mission critical. Who would you turn it over to?
I would turn it over to a man.
You turn it over to the men because they would be much more excellent performing those duties than women, right?
Yeah, and I can totally agree with you on that, but I do think that the presence of women in those positions, I mean,
Yeah, but she, a woman, would be in power, right? I suppose the men could rebel, right? But this goes back to what I was saying before, right? Men can take the side of women or be manipulated by women or be, you know, do for whatever reason do a woman's bidding, right? So mm, yeah, maybe ultimately they could not do that, right? Choose not to do that. So ultimately, I suppose the power would be with them, but well, for the time being, they are doing it. So, and again, you could envision a situation where maybe they couldn't, right? Maybe you could grab a hold of their hearts, their minds, by whatever means, to a point where they would just do your bidding no matter what.
they are present in those positions. And also, I guess my question would be, do you think that the enforcement of rights is the most important part of like a well-functioning society? Like, do you think that is
the enforcement of law and order is critical to society? So the Greeks said, without law, there is no freedom, right? You would agree that that's probably true. I don't see how you could really descend into anarchy and have actual freedom. It would just end up in like a slave eats slave oppressive, this type of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do think that law and the enforcement of law and rights and the enforcement of rights or duties and the enforcement of duties are critical to a society. So while I don't believe in the construction of rights because they don't really exist absent force, I do understand that having some
Rights don't exist absent force. I don't believe in that doesn't make any sense to me. I don't believe in the construction of rights, right? That's a concept because rights don't exist absent force. So concepts don't exist absent force. That does not follow.
some kind of core belief towards something can be useful in
Okay.
keeping a cohesive society together, but I don't believe that women are capable of doing that. And so I do understand that having some kind of core belief towards something can be useful in keeping a cohesive society together, but I don't believe.
And obviously, maybe it's not so obvious. I'm responding to what Andrew's saying is because, well, she's not really, he's dominating the conversation and she's not really providing any objections, really. She's not contributing much. She's just allowing him to dominate, right? This is why I don't watch these because it's just sometimes some of the arguments, it would seem to me, on these shows are just so ridiculous and so easy to debunk or question or address, right? And I'm not calling this girl a bimbo. I don't think I don't care. I don't. I don't get this from her, from this particular one. She seems pretty smart, intelligent, but she's definitely a beta, right?
Believe that women are capable of doing that. And so because they're not equal, they cannot be equal because useful in keeping a cohesive society together, but I don't believe that women are capable of doing that. And so because they're not equal, they cannot.
Well, all you've proved so far is that for the time being, absent technology or certain equalizers, women aren't as physically strong as men. How did that become equal or unequal? Why? That's just one thing, right? Like, well, men, you could just as well say, well, men aren't equal because they can't birth babies, right? You need women to make more men, right? And yeah, I mean, parthenogenesis isn't a thing yet, at least not in people. Who knows though, right? Who knows though? So sure, you need men to make more men too, but I mean, who's really doing, insofar as that's concerned, right? Who's really doing the labor, right? So I mean, women aren't. This is so silly, right? Because women aren't as strong as men, right? Physically, they can't lift or fight as well. They can't lift as much weight or fight as well as men. That means they're not equal in general, right? That's a fallacy. They're not as strong as men, right? And I don't know why I would grant a Christian that might is right anyway, right? So this just seems incoherent to me. This doesn't make any sense. I don't get where this is coming from, and those would be the questions that I would ask, right?
Not be equal because of this. I don't understand why they should have equal rights to vote, why they should have equal rights to men, if they are not in the position where they can actually enforce their own.
Right? So women shouldn't have a say in how society is run because they're not as strong. I mean, come on. Oh, how old are we? Seriously, how old are we?
Own rights, and only men can.
I guess I fail to see how, okay, women cannot physically enforce their own rights leads to
Because
women should not have equal rights, or an egalitarian society is not possible because, I mean, even the way you said it, law and order is only one critical aspect of a well-functioning society. So if that's only one critical aspect, then how can you say, well, this one aspect?
Wait, how can you have law and order absent rights? On the one hand, he says rights don't exist, right? I'm so confused. But there should be law and order? How are you gonna have order where you can't have right when rights don't exist? Huh? Unless by order you mean chaos, then force, right? People just dominating one another. All the strong dominating all the weak, beating them down to a point where the weak just do what they're told. Yeah, but then I would think that all the strong would turn on each other, and this whole, rah rah, look at me, I'm a big tough macho man society would just cannibalize itself. This is such a, and it's not even his worldview. It can't be. How can this be Christian? How is this Christian?
Aspect, and the fact that men are going to dominate this one aspect. They're not going to be the sole, that women will exist, but men will dominate this one aspect. How can you say that?
Because they're always going to be making the appeal to men for those rights, and there's no way around it.
No, they're not. What's right is right. Right? You have to. Does she believe might makes right? Because you certainly never justified why it should be so. So I don't even understand why we're. But she's just weak at this. She just like grants him all this stuff. She just grants him that might makes right, and that rights don't exist absent force, and that whatever the third thing was, I forgot.
And so men can collectively take the rights away from women. Period. They just can. There's nothing that women can do about
it. Again, they can't, but they can violate their rights, right? Well, if all the men, right? If all men just stop existing all of a sudden, do we say that women don't have the right to anything anymore? Huh? What kind of fucking sense does that make? Or then I guess women would be the enforcers of rights? No, rights, it's a concept. Wherever you think it comes from, whether it's God given, their God given rights, or it's a social agreement, social contract, construct, and a contract, uh, that doesn't require any force. That just requires intellect, debate, agreement. That's all that requires, right? Now, making sure that these rights are protected, okay, that's force. And punishing those that don't respect the rights that we agree exist, right? However they came to be. Yeah, they're two different things.
this. So egalitarianism in and of itself would just be an illusion. It would literally be a lie. You would be walking around saying that you're equal with men. You have equality with them, but at the same time necessarily having to appeal to them for that equality, which it makes it contradictory, right? How do you appeal to the thing for equality while at the same time saying that you're equal?
So you think that the fact that women have to appeal to men for their equality means that there
Hmm.
shouldn't be an attempt at like an egalitarian society? There shouldn't
Well, what
be
is the attempt? It would be an illusion, right? Men can just collectively take it away, but women cannot do that to the opposition. Only men can. So men can take away men's rights, and men can take away women's rights, and men can give men rights. Men can give women rights, but women can't give men rights nor take men's rights away.
I mean, if
Nobody can take anybody's rights away.
I just think it's easier to say that.
How do you take away a concept? How do you take away a thing that doesn't exist, as Andrew says? In the physical, it's not a tangible thing. How can you take away a thing that's this is incoherent?
Our system of rights, I mean, I know that I agree with you that our rights are sort of a construct, but we do have in practice legal rights. I find it hard to just say that, like, well, that's all an illusion because we're living it every day. I mean, we have legal rights. If you commit a crime, you go to jail. I mean, that is all a social construct, but we're living it. I mean,
you're talking about a descriptor of is and ought. It is true. We go through life with all sorts of kind of presuppositions and suppositions which aren't true all the time to get through the day. We do this all the time. For instance, there's no real reason for you to go in and turn your car on and think it's going to start, except that you're a pattern recognition machine and it's always started, and so you assume that it's going to start. If you had some pre-knowledge that it wouldn't, you would have taken the steps to make sure that the next day you got in and it would start, right? Everything that you do in your life as you're going through it is built on all sorts of unfounded suppositions that probably aren't true at all, but we still act as though they are in order to have a society. But eventually, what ends up happening,
Expecting your car to start tomorrow the same way it started for the last 5 years of you having it is not exactly unfounded.
is we do have to face down actual facts and actual reality. And in actual reality, if you end up with too much internal conflict based around this egalitarian system, what's actually going to prevent men from just taking away women's rights altogether? There doesn't seem like there's anything that would stop that from
Other men. That's, I mean, do you need examples? This happens all the time.
happening.
I mean, that would require like widespread, like mass violence by men against women.
Why would it require any violence?
I mean, well, okay, because if you're saying it wouldn't require violence, then you're giving.
Because women would be, if this like world, imaginary world actually existed, well, women would be forced to fight. Some women would choose to fight men. They have no choice. And this has happened in the past, right?
You're giving some kind of like, you're admitting that this system of legality that we have has some kind of like.
No, I'm just saying that if it is true that men can.
So we don't even know what she was about to say. This is just, yeah, she's too beta to have this debate. Andrew's just like framing everything, controlling everything, just, it's boring.
By use of force, and I think most women know this, could do this. Why, if they decided to, do you think that women would, what do you think they could do about it? Take to the street with their little signs and say, please don't?
But I don't. To me, that sounds like you're saying it.
They could manipulate other men to help them, right? To join their ranks, convince other men, right? This idea that all these husbands, brothers, right, sons of all these women would just go against them. Like, come on, what the fuck?
It would be an act of violence. How else? How are men going to take away women's rights without violence?
If men collectively tomorrow say women have no more rights, what are the options left to women?
I mean, legal political exercises.
Mm-hmm.
And in that case, you say men are stronger, they could exercise violence against women to take their rights.
What? This is what again? What husband would just say allow? Essentially, this is what he's saying. He's saying a husband would just allow other men to have, well, I guess maybe not with his wife, but I was gonna say have their way with his, because then she would be his property or whatever, right? So he would be violating the men's rights to his property. Oh, gotcha. No, but just in general, like, what men would be okay with? I don't know. Let's just say orphans or something. Women that don't belong to a man. They're not property of any man. Just being, and anything being done to them being okay. What kind of men would think that that's, these wouldn't be men, right? Like, they'd be just devils with penises. This, I understand that it's hypothetically possible, but I mean, this is that fucked up might is right worldview, which cannot be Christian. So why is Andrew arguing for this? Is someone, like, maybe I'm too fucking dumb to get it, but someone explain this to me.
They may not need to exercise any violence. All they may need to do is just say, you no longer have the rights, and women really just can't do anything about it. They could maybe collectivize with signs, but what happens if they're just ignored or laughed at or scoffed or mocked, and they can't really take violence to men? So in political action.
So what he's essentially saying, right? Orthodox Christian, what he's saying is that morality doesn't exist. That's what he's saying. That's why this is so fucking incoherent.
Right? There is always what is called the violent alternative, and men can always appeal to that alternative. It's a terrible thing. I'm not advocating for that. I'm giving a descriptor for what is true.
I'm not advocating. I'm just threatening you. Right?
This is something which can be appealed to for men, but only for men. Women can only do small scale. So even in kind of the craziest feminists you can think of, the best they were able to do is like send some boom booms in the mail and this kind of thing. But they couldn't really push back against a structure of strength. It wasn't really possible for them to do. You see the voting gap as it begins to widen, as men become more right wing and women more left wing. What happens eventually if what is considered the patriarchy has been pushed against just decides one day, no, no more rights for women?
I think in that case there would be political opposition, and I think there would be widespread collective political opposition from women. And if you say that's
Now, while that's hypothetically possible, it's not really possible. Okay, that's never really going to happen. At least not worldwide. There's there are societies that accept this sort of thing, but I think that's also because the women do, to a large degree, right? Because I mean, if society doesn't accept it, then it doesn't accept it, right? Then it just falls apart. This idea that like women don't have a say, right? When you couldn't have men without women, right? So hypothetically, you could, right? If it's hypothetically possible that like we live in this world where all men are against all women, and they're completely two different, clearly delineated, separate teams that are just at constant war, or at least potentially with one another, some kind of war, if not kinetic war, some kind of hybrid warfare at all times. Well, then women could just say, "All right, no more fucking, guys. No more. We're not gonna do this anymore. We're not gonna make any more babies. We're not gonna give you any. We're not gonna be your wives. We're not gonna be nothing to you, right?" Now, Andrew to that would say, "No, then we would just take it then, right?" Christian or devil? You tell me.
futile because men can just
Where's the widespread political opposition in the Middle East where they have no rights? They're not allowed. The thing is you presuppose that women will be allowed to go out and have picket signs, or presuppose that women can go out in protest.
So, from what I understand, this sort of mistreatment of women in the Middle East, or um, this clear inequality between the sexes, is a fairly new thing historically, right? It came with um, well, I don't actually know the history of it, but you know, it's certain kind of Islamic um, it's basically a fuck. I'm tired, guys. It's a new thing, right? It's just it is a thing right now. It's a very real thing right now, but it wasn't always does, and it's not gonna last. This thing's not gonna last. I don't think so anyway. And there's plenty of pushback against it anyway. And again, if women collectively didn't want it to be this way, then it wouldn't be this way, right? They must want it. Maybe probably because they were brainwashed to a large degree or whatever, right? Maybe they like it, right? They men and women are part of the same society, right? And yeah, there's always going to be outliers, or there's going to be opposition groups or whatever, and maybe they need to be quashed or whatever, but most societies, in order to again remain cohesive, right, as Andrew says, they have to have some kind of law and order. There has to be order. There has to be cohesion. And in order for cohesion to exist, I think you need agreement, right? You need the desire for the society to cohere. Women, by and large, have to want to be this way for whatever reason in order for a society to remain this way. And as soon as enough of them say no more, however they get to it, right? History tells us, and okay, maybe they were manipulated by some men to be this way or whatever you want to say, but when women basically get fed up, and enough of them do, with this, with the way things are in society, right? They'll convince their husbands and they'll teach their sons to be a certain way, right? The way they want them to be, the way they want them to treat women, and society will change. So this idea that like women have no power in society is just because they're, they don't have big muscles. That's just fucking stupid.
Yes, presuppose that women will still be able to have the same functions they have now if men collectively say no. And I'm telling you, I don't think that that's the case. Everything down from the husband inside of the home to the boyfriend inside of the home to the actual structure of government, all enforcing collectively, or even a small collection, maybe 10%, I think women can't really do anything.
I mean, I would agree they can't do anything physically, but that would require men to collectively decide to use violence against women. And I don't believe that most men would be willing to.
So Andrew pushes this idea that might is right, right? We're at war, the sexes are against one another, right? But that's not a violent society. There wouldn't be any violence or anything. Women would just do as I tell them to. Huh? This guy has not dated much, has he? Uh,
Use violence against women.
so the reason I say that is because we've all been, well, some of us at least, like we've been in arguments with women, right? And if you push her hard enough, she'll fucking hit you, right? She'll use physical violence against you when she doesn't get her way, and you keep escalating, right? Now, some men will hit them back, I guess, or subdue them, or something. But I mean, a lot of men won't. Okay, a lot of men just don't have it in them to do that, right? Well, why is that? Well, probably because they respect their mothers and they were raised right by their mothers. So this is this idea that it's just, again, this whole might is right, and this sexual battleground where men are just against women. What kind of a fucking sick fantasy is this? That's not the world we live in.
Women for political
Then
means.
if that's true, why the hell did you need feminism?
Because I don't think that it was about violence. Would be willing to use violence against women for political means.
Then if that's true, why?
I don't believe that most men would be willing to use violence against women for political means.
Then if that's true,
Exactly.
why the hell did you need feminism?
because I don't think that it was about violence.
But Andrew knows, right? Because they were brainwashed. Enough women were brainwashed by other men. So why is he beating down, quote unquote, beating down this little girl, right? If he knows what the roots of feminism are, and because I've heard him talk about his wife's book and speak on the topic on his show. It was men, right? I mean, it's the patriarchy, right? Patriarchy, whatever the patriarchy decides goes, right? Without patriarchy, you couldn't have feminism. Patriarchy created feminism. You are the patriarchy, Andrew. What the fuck are you beating her down for? The things that you and your team did. What the fuck? Why you, why are you taking this shit out on her? Shouldn't you be? Oh, right, because you're on the same team, so you can't go against your homies. Because bros before hoes, you're on the same team, right? Except your own team isn't exactly that which you would like it to be. All of you guys don't agree on everything. This whole fucking thing is incoherent, man. I'm just saying. It just seems incoherent to me.
Violence. I think that it was about a lack of political rights, if I can use that word.
Well, then, but we
Political
already have
entitlements.
we've already discerned that rights are force.
Mhm.
So if we've discerned that rights are force, and you say that we want more,
Right? All these like premises that are fucking retarded. Let's just keep it real. This shit's retarded. And she just grants it like, yeah, None of this makes any fucking sense. What do you mean rights are force? I'm not repeating myself.
rights, it means that you want to have more force.
Sure.
So then you needed
Grant me all of my premises so that I could have my big old gotcha. Grant me all of my bullshit premises that don't make any fucking sense so that I could. Come on, man. This is why I don't enjoy these fucking things, man. Because it's just dudes with fucking big egos who think that they're all that. Quote unquote beating up on, little dumb girls. She's not dumb, but she's just not sophisticated. But that's what whatever is. A lot of what, it seems to be anyway, right? It'll be like a dude or two or three dudes who practiced what they're going to say. They have their fucking algorithms and they got their framed game on point. They got their talking points. Everything's rehearsed, ready to go. And they get a whole bunch of bimbos that just don't know how to formulate an argument, don't know how to contest basic fucking fallacies. They just, they're just not debaters, right? And it's like these dudes just flexing on these chicks. Like, really? I don't know, man. Seriously, like, who enjoys this and why? Like, if you do, you need some serious introspection, I think.
needed feminism, right? Feminism was a way for you to have force.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that social movements like collective political
But why
action
do you
can
need-
approximate
For sure.
force.
But what
Let her talk, right? At least let her talk a little bit.
do you
women.
need force for if you're saying that men collectively would not move against women using force?
So that I could get a fucking word in. That's what she needs force for. So she could get a fucking word in.
Why the hell do you need force then?
I think that they would.
How dare you contest the things I say? Ooh, Andrew, you need some serious introspection, my dude. Like, I don't know. You really. I'm just saying, man. I'm not trying to psychologize, really, but Seek help, brother. For real, like seek help and look deep within your soul and figure out what it is that's fucking wrong with you, bro. Cause this what you're doing here, that's not manly. That's for damn sure.
Would collectively move against women using force. I'm saying,
Well,
like,
then you just contradicted yourself.
Well, political. I'm talking more in a political force sense. I don't.
Gotcha. Oh, you accepted all this bullshit I put in your head, right? I'm the one who fed you all this bullshit, and you accepted it. So obviously, the only thing that's gonna come out of your mouth after that, or at some point, the things that come out of your mouth, and she does a very good job of on her own as well. I get that, but you know, if I feed you, gaslight you with a whole bunch of fucking bullshit, and then you repeat it back to me, then I'm gonna get you, right? Come on, man.
Don't think that men
What
in
is
general
political
would.
force?
I think the use of, like, rights, things like
Politics is force.
that, like restricting rights, restricting mobility, disenfranchisement,
That's
things
all
like
force.
that. It's all backed up with force, but I don't think it always necessarily translates to a one-to-one.
It is force because absent force, law has no bite. So if somebody says it is the law that you not.
So before it was law doesn't exist absent force, right? Now it's law has no bite. So which is it? Right? Absent force, law exists, right? Rights don't exist, absent force, and now they do. Okay, well, speaking of contradictions,
Not do X. But there's no enforcement if you break the law. Is that a law?
I mean, is enforcement always violence? Like, isn't
yes, it's a law because you just broke it, right? How can you break something that doesn't exist?
Enforcement always must be backed with physical violence for a law or for any type of right, period.
Maybe backed with the threat of, but do you think that all enforcement takes place solely through the threat?
Enforcement always must be backed with physical violence. X. But there's no enforcement if you break the law. Is that a law?
I mean, is enforcement always violence? Like, is enforcement...
Enforcement always must be backed with physical violence for a law.
So before he was saying, why would we need violence, right? You could just take away all your rights. Why would we need violence? And now he's saying enforcement is always backed by violence, right? I mean, who are the contradictions coming from?
Or for any type of right, period.
Maybe backed with the threat of, but do you think that all enforcement takes place solely through the threat of physical violence?
Yes.
Or do you think there are social mechanisms?
All of it has to be backed with the physical prowess of enforcement. Otherwise, why couldn't it just be ignored?
I mean, I think that there are things beyond...
Again, just contradicting himself, right?
Beyond the threat of physical violence that can... I agree with you that the threat of physical violence is what backs.
He totally gaslighted this girl, right? To a point where she's contradicting herself now. Like he convinced her that what she was saying at first was wrong, right? That you don't need violence to enforce. And now he convinced her again that of the exact opposite, right?
The majority of our, our laws, but do you not think there's also a social aspect of, like, appropriate?
So basically, look, I'm just doing this off the cuff, right? But basically, laws don't exist absent force, and force is violence or the threat of violence, right? Which is violence. But when she was saying that, you couldn't you couldn't take away women's rights without force, right? That was, or you'd have to use violence somehow. Yeah, I hope that makes sense. He completely contradicted himself.
Appropriateness and like wanting to be perceived in a certain way, wanting to keep with
If
norms,
you're asking
customs.
about social norms,
Yeah.
sure, but if there's a violation to a social norm, absent a law, that's one of the problems we have in society now, right? Which is there's no law which prevents you from moving outside of a social norm.
Mm-hmm.
So if that is the case, then nothing's preventing you. So let's say, for instance, there's no law which says that it's illegal to go out and dig up a dead body and do a dirty deed to it. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
You agree that there will be people who do.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. But wouldn't it be better for us to have a law and force saying if you do this, there's going to be severe punishments for you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the social norm itself is not the enforcement, it's always the force.
Okay. Yeah, I can agree with that. I guess I still am stuck on how that means that we can't have an egalitarian society. Okay. I guess I should ask.
You would have the illusion of egalitarianism, but you never actually have egalitarianism. That will always be a product of the mind and never a product of objective reality.
Okay, so is your view of feminism that it is pointless because there
Yes.
can never be egalitarianism?
Well, so you just earlier, and no offense, I'm just going to point this out so that you know, you spoke out of two sides of your mouth. You said, I don't believe that men would collectively come together to use some kind of force against women. But when I asked why would you need feminism, then you said, well, because we need to have some kind of force to protect ourselves from that men would collectively come together to use some kind of force against women. No offense, I'm just going to point this out so that you know, you spoke out of two sides of your mouth. You said, I don't believe that men would collectively come together to use some kind of force against women. But when I asked,
Well, she said they would have to, but she doesn't believe that they would do it.
why would you need feminism then? You said, well, because we need to have some kind of force to protect ourselves from the patriarchy. Well, both of these things cannot be true at the same time. This is where we come to what we call Schrodinger's feminist, which is I'm a strong, empowered woman, but also a victim at the same exact time. And it can't really be both. It has to be one or it has to be the other. So if you're a strong, empowered woman, and what it is that you want is some type of equal force to push back against the patriarchy, I think we've just discovered that that's not even a possibility. So what's really going on is you want some sort of political power, right? But you can't enforce the political power.
Well, that is, and when I say that equal force to push back against the patriarchy, I mean political power, because I don't think that men will collectively decide to use violence against women. So
they do it all over the world all the time.
Well, yes, on an individual level. I don't think collectively.
On a collective level.
Okay, so what do you think the solution to that should be for women?
Well, I think the first solution is you should understand that what you're doing is you're fighting the patriarchy by...
We're just gonna let that go, right? We're just gonna be like, yeah, what? That's all. That's cool. Is this? This is some dark, dark fucking shit this dude believes, right? But we're just cool with that. I mean, you tell me. He's justifying, right, men using violence against women. He's threatening women with violence, right? There doesn't have to be any violence. Just submit. That's fucked up.
At the same time appealing to it. So if you and I can agree that force itself is political power, and that force itself is always going to be monopolized by men, then you've described a patriarchal system. If that is the case, and you say you want more political power, then you...
If force was always monopolized by men, right? And how did you have, you know, Catherine the Great or whatever her name was, Cleopatra, right? Like um, Queen Elizabeth, right? Yeah, I mean, men would do their bidding, but they were just doing their bidding.
You are actually appealing to a patriarchal system to give it to you. Yeah, because they're going to be the enforced described a patriarchal system. If that is the case, and you say you want more political power, then you are actually appealing to a patriarchal system to give it to you. Yeah. Because they're going
Well, the patriarchal system created feminism. You should take responsibility for it, right? Because that's your team. And you guys are this big monolith, right? That all think the same, all want the same thing, right? And you could just decide like that tomorrow to violate women's rights, and I guess it would be okay. You're not advocating for that, right? You'd rather threaten them with the possibility than do it. And so long as they submit, then you won't do it. That's why you're in. I don't understand this, what this worldview is, or why anyone should accept it.
They're going to be the enforcers, right? I can agree with that. I don't think it's good. I don't enjoy that situation. So why not just have patriarchy? If that's the case, that you're appealing to it anyway in order to enforce your rights inside of it, why not just submit to patriarchy? Because
Well, there it is, right? There it is. I'm sorry, guys. Like, this is. Andrew likes threatening women with violence so that they submit. He doesn't really want to use violence, as he's probably not able to do it because moral compass and shit like that, right? Unless he said, I don't know. I'm just saying, like, this is. Why would it occur to a man to flex like that on a woman, right? And clearly take joy in it, take pleasure in this threatening a woman with violence, right? So that she submits. Why don't you just submit, right? We could do this the easy way, or we could do it the hard way. We're in charge anyway. Whatever happens, you have no say. We do what we want with you, right? So instead of just kicking and screaming, why don't you just submit? Even though we're the ones who brainwashed you with this, with all these crazy feminist ideas, right? It's like he just enjoys tormenting women. It is what it is, man. I don't know. I was asked to review this, and this is the best I got. If you think it's garbage, it's garbage. If you were hoping to hear something else, I don't know. This is when I watch these, listen to these things, watch these things, and I analyze them, and I hear these. This is just what I got. You know what I mean? I don't know. Maybe I made a whole bunch of errors, fucked up somewhere along the way, but this is why I don't like these. I don't enjoy these shows, whether it's Fresh and Fit or certain whatever podcasts are cool. You know, again, I think I watched Trent Horn and Destiny one time, and that was pretty cool. I enjoy that. But this sort of thing here, and what's troubling is that these are like the big hitters, I would imagine, right? I don't know, maybe some of the guys, not this one specifically, but shows with the bimbos on there. I don't know, maybe a lot of young men just go there for the boobs, right? Or something. Or because, women are talking about sex and it gets them off, or whatever the case may be, right? I'm sure there's lots of that. But then there's also this, to me, this comes across as like some kind of sick, twisted Dom fantasy. You know what I mean? Just wanting to, quote unquote, again, right? I'm not saying literally, but like just beat up and torment like little girls that aren't really up to snuff, right? It's bitch made, really. That's what this is. It's bitch made, right? Hope you liked the video. Take care.